So as Rachel said, I'd like this to be a very interactive session. I see we have a very, very good turnout today, and I'm going to be asking questions throughout, and I encourage you to respond back and let me know, what your considerations are as I'm going through this. And if you have questions, you can either hold them to the end or you can ask them during the presentation. Either way works fine for me. I really want this to be more of a conversation than a one-way presentation, so please feel free to ask. A little bit about myself. My name is Ross Rehart. I've been at Burwood here for a little less than a year. My role here is that I'm in charge of all managed services across the company and managed services delivery to our customers. I came out of a large ISP where I ran all of their IT services NOCs across the country for the last 10 years. So I've been doing this for quite a while now. I've sat on the side of the fence as a director of IT, so I kind of know both sides of the business, and what I'm here today is to kind of go through my experiences, to go through considerations that you think about when you're thinking about managed services, to kind of demystify what managed services is, and to debunk any kind of myth that might be out there in terms of managed services. So let me go through the agenda. First is, we're going to talk about the trends and challenges in enterprise IT today. This is an ever-changing world in enterprise IT. Enterprise IT is something that is defined in so much as it's a job description, but it's not defined as in what the enterprise is doing today, tomorrow, and the next day, because anything you do today will likely be out of date tomorrow. What is managed IT services? What are some of the benefits of that? Why would you choose that for your organization? Why is it right or not right for your organization? And finally, evaluating the services providers that are out there. All managed services providers are not created equal. It's never an apples-to-apples comparison, as much as we'd like it to be. Some may fit, some may not. You may find in your particular environment that you may need several managed IT services providers, depending on what they offer and how they offer it and how they deliver it to you. So let's jump right into it. Who can speak to the challenges that any of you might be seeing in your company today? And again, feel free to answer if there's through the chat or otherwise. And for us, for the people in IT, what inevitably happens is that the company comes to you and says, your IT budget's going to be small, you have to do more with less, but you have to deliver all the latest, greatest things, the workplace of the future. You have to deliver M&A strategies, you have to deliver ever-increasing business strategies, and the IT has to be the base of that. And the companies that I've worked with and that I've worked for have constantly been told, you can do all that and you have to do all that in order to enable my business, but I'm going to cut your budget back, or I'm going to keep your budget stagnant. To figure out a way to do it, and the IT guy is always the MacGyver of an organization, figure out a way to do it with what you have or without spending any money. We have several very large clients that this really plays into, billion-dollar clients that we're working with to consolidate, to re-optimize, to rebuild their entire networks, global networks, because they've had many mergers and acquisitions and they have a lot of overlap. So even though the company into and of itself has grown by a factor of 3 in the billions of dollars ranges, what the IT staff has been asking, what the CIO has been asked is, because of the growth and because of the overlap, I want you to slash the other 2/3 from those M&As and do it with the 1/3 you were always doing it with. So we have to come up with creative ways to do that. Automation, management, vendor management, all those become challenges. Because of that kind of environment, IT staffs are constantly reactive and not proactive. I've been in countless environments where companies could not keep their IT staff long enough because the IT staff was getting burned out just due to the sheer workload. They were constantly being woken up in the middle of the night. They didn't have any quality off time. They didn't have any quality vacation time. They were, again, asked to, I know you're a server guy or a systems guy, but I want you to learn these 6 other things as well. Get on YouTube, whatever you have to do. I'm not going to give you a lot of training, but learn that, do that, help me deliver this service. That's a constant chicken and the egg scenario where the CIO or the IT director may go and say, I need more staff or I need specialized staff for that. The CFO or the money people will say, that's great, you can't have it, do it with what you've got. So that creates a necessarily reactive environment. You're constantly reacting to the needs of the business, you're constantly reacting to issues within your IT environment. A lot of companies that I've worked with indeed have their own installations of monitoring type software, everything from MRTG to HP OpenView to SolarWinds. I said, well, we've got our monitoring software, so we don't really need a managed services company. And inevitably, when I ask the question, how are you keeping that software up? How are you making sure that it's actually meeting your needs? How are you, paying attention to the IT needs of the monitoring software itself? And in fact, what is the software doing for you? And quite often I get the response, it's telling me when something goes down. That's a great response, but what it's not doing for you and what all those software platforms are capable of doing is telling you there's a problem before it happens. And being able to react to that, having the staff to react to that, to these problems before they happen, to the signs that the systems are throwing at you, is really where managed services comes in. It takes the warning signs and acts on those as opposed to takes on the crash and acting on that in the hopes of preventing the crash altogether. The next thing is multi-home environments. Multi-home environments are very commonplace today. We have cloud, we have on-prem, we have data center, we have multiple data centers, we have DR challenges. Everybody wants to put a little bit here and a little bit there. Compliance often dictates that we have to have something in the cloud or not. Compliance will dictate to what level of security we have. And what this led to is, while the cloud is supposed to, in theory, centralize our ability to manage things, it's actually decentralized a lot of stuff. And very few companies are either pure cloud companies or pure infrastructure-owned companies anymore. They're very, very often a hybrid. And often, in those environments, I find that companies have the challenges of managing not only the vendors, but the data itself, managing the applications where they're at, where they're going to, where the compliance comes in, being able to report on that, being able to quickly spin it up or spin it down, not waste money on environments that are stale, or environments that were, I had to set up these 10 servers in the cloud to do X, Y, Z, and X, Y, Z got postponed because I was reacting to something else. So often I find companies that are in these hybrid environments, especially in a cloud environment, have paid for and are continuing to pay for resources that are not used. So because of the necessity and the desire of business to go multi-home, what we're seeing is companies lose track of where their IT actually is. The next thing that IT faces is the workplace of the future. So as the workforce comes in and the new workforce comes in, the millennials come in, the younger generation comes in, they demand more and more remote type access. They demand that when they come into the office that they get the exact same experience in the office as they have at a Starbucks. And then they're working from home, they have, again, that exact same experience. And splitting this out and constant collaboration having to be available and the ability to speak across the globe if necessary, from one point to the other without delays. This workplace of the future is really not a workplace per se, but it's a work environment. And so companies are really struggling with not only how to implement that, but how to manage that. I mean, just think about just the remote access into the environment. You say, well, I've got my stuff in the cloud. How are you controlling that access? How are you auditing that access? I have my stuff in the data center. Again, same thing. How am I controlling it? How am I providing for it? How am I auditing it? These are all questions that managed services can help you answer. And then ultimately, because of all of the above, you get this increasing number of service providers, vendors, yada, yada, yada. And what companies end up with is they end up with either an overlap, meaning they have several vendors that overlap services, are providing the same services or like services on the same platforms for them, or they actually end up with an underlap, that is a gap in coverage without knowing it. So, oh, I've got network management, and I've got cloud management, and I have application management. Great, I'm covered. But what didn't get thought of is, what about the circuit management in between? What about the defined networking? Oh, well, I thought that was part of my network management. But because of the size and complexity of environments anymore, that's becoming a harder and harder thing to do. So what are some of the benefits? First is cost savings. And inevitably, when I go into a new customer, the question gets asked, how are you going to justify the cost of your services to my CFO? And I started personally talking about the business, talking about enabling the business, talking about IT's mission within the business. But what I get back is, yes, but I'm going to have to fire 2 guys to pay for you, or I'm going to have to get rid of my SolarWinds implementations to pay for you. Often businesses look at this as a trade-off as opposed to an augment to services. So I ask, in plain English, what does it cost you, for instance, when you do have that critical outage that your software is telling you about? What does it cost you in time? What does it cost you in real business revenue? What does it cost you in restoration? What does it cost you in follow-on root cause analysis? For instance, if I have a manufacturer and the manufacturer has an outage at one of the core nodes in the network, I ask the business, what is the cost per hour if that manufacturing plant is not talking to the sales office? If that manufacturing plant can't keep up or order what they need in order to keep your manufacturing flowing, how much is that costing you per hour? Some companies have that answer right off the top of their head. Some do not. A lot do not, in fact. And when you start thinking about the cost of what the IT environment can affect, you start thinking about the cost that it takes to take an IT resource off of project A to put him on fix A, or to take that sales office out of communication with the manufacturing plant, say, wow, I don't think that it's necessarily a trade-off of costs anymore. It actually becomes this cost savings. You know, you think about other things like what, for instance, what does it cost your business when projects aren't completed on time? So the business asks constantly, if I have to do a project, if I have to build this new application or build this new infrastructure in order to support our new service, if that's not completed on time, all the other business planning kind of goes out the window. But it's not completed because I'm reacting or because I'm having to pay attention to another area of the business or a vendor or something that's not allowing me the time to do what I need to. The other part of this is specialized staff, right? So you say, when I'm talking about the staff that I have, many companies, large and small, and again, we have multi-billion-dollar companies under our umbrella, don't have either the money or the ability to hire specialized resources. So a Citrix expert, a networking expert, an application expert, a storage expert. They just don't have the resources to do that. It's not cost effective for them to say, I'm going to hire all of these specialties at the expert level that I need to really grow and manage the business. Some do, but many don't. Large and small, they don't do that, and especially when you get into the smaller businesses, the $500 million, $500 million and down, that money becomes tighter and tighter in the ability to do that. So companies often find themselves either saying, I have to bite the bullet and spend this much money on that, which takes X percentage out of my budget every year, or I have to find somebody that is already paying for that at a much lower cost. So by comparison, most managed services providers have the experts on their staffs. Many of them do, if not all of them, have an expert in given areas. So let's say, for example, a Citrix expert. They have 3 or 4 of them on their staff where they're paying that money and spreading the cost amongst many clients. So for you, it becomes an OpEx as opposed to a CapEx. The next thing is being able to predict spending. So many customers that we talk to, I asked one customer this morning that I was talking to, and I said, how do you trend out exactly what your capacity management is going to need to be today, tomorrow, and 18 months from now? How are you going to tell me how much compute, how much storage, how much memory you need? How many IOPS do you need, given the state of your business and the type of business that you're in? And he says, how do you think I do it? I said, I think you don't. He said, you're absolutely right. I have no idea how to get that data and what that means. That is not an uncommon answer. A managed services provider, just by the nature of what they do, by monitoring your business, by being part of your business infrastructure, by being part of your IT staff, the managed services provider can provide you that logical telemetry on your infrastructure, whatever is being monitored, and historical trending data, and they can help you build predictive analysis. That's a good thing because it helps your staff focus on what the staff should be focused on. Quite frankly, the IT staff should not be there as a break-fix component of an organization. An IT staff should be there to enable the business to grow, to enable the business to be profitable, to enable the business to fulfill its mission. That should be the known function of the IT staff. Too many IT staffs are still stuck in the mode of, I have to go fix a printer, or I have to react to this router being down, as opposed to let me think how I can prevent that in the first place. By bringing in a company that effectively offloads the day-to-day operation of the network and the day-to-day worry or the day-to-day thought of how is this going to affect that, by bringing that in, it allows the staff to focus on the business itself and to actually enable that business to do what it needs to do and what it's asking to do. So when the CEO comes down and says, we have a new initiative and we're going to go out and sell 45 new widgets, the IT staff can think about, great, he wants to sell 45 new widgets. We expect to sell 45 million of these in the next year. How are we going to enable sales and manufacturing and anybody else to do that? That's how they do that. They give out the operational day-to-day to a managed services company or to some other entity such that they can concentrate on answering the CEO's question. Next, we talk about the time to resolution. Let's talk about this in context of specialized technology. So again, we are talking about a Citrix environment, a software-defined networking environment, a SQL environment, a storage environment. How do you cope with that? How do you resolve issues on that? How do you plan for that? The question, Rachel just put up there, who here in this group today has been asked, you got to learn a new technology. Go out on YouTube and read all you can. Something I talked about at the outset. One of the companies I've been in previously, the IT person that was there at the time literally asked to set up a brand new install of SharePoint, which he never had any knowledge of before, and he had to go out and learn on YouTube. Go out and learn how to set up SharePoint. That actually increases time to resolution of any issue. Thinking about that, let's think about time to resolution and seeing these issues before they become issues. If you think about the evolution of a problem with IT infrastructure or IT applications, software, hardware, whatever, if you think about it and you go back to a root cause analysis, very often you'll find that is not an act of God, for lack of a better way of putting it, that caused an issue. It's a failure of one thing: people, process, or technology. One of those three things are going to fail. And often there are warning signs. So going back to my example of setting up SharePoint, had no idea how to do it, watched all the YouTube videos, got it set up as best it could, but it wasn't operating. In a very short time after he did that and everybody migrated all their data to it, the SharePoint infrastructure went down and they lost all their data. Why did that happen? It happened because if you go back, you say, I didn't have the right experts, I didn't have the right training, I didn't set up the environment with the right resources. The root cause analysis uncovers all of these things that should have been seen by the business as they're planning it. So what managed services does is it allows you to see your environment as it is and plan for what it should be. And as you're rolling that out, it allows you to break, fix, break, test each one of the items that are being rolled out in sequence. And in that sequential manner, be able to say, yes, this will operate as planned, no, it won't. Yes, this will be load tested, no, it won't. Yes, this will handle what the business needs to do, no, it won't. So these outages start showing me telemetry, and they start saying, okay, the SAN is not taking the capacity out. The SAN is not giving me the IOPS that I need. I need to think about that before I go further in this project, before I have the total loss of data or the total loss of environment. So because of that business intelligence and the intelligence of the infrastructure, it allows you to see issues before they become outages. Coincidentally, MSPs allow you to quickly react to alerts and events. In all the environments that I've seen across my years of doing this, and even in the environments where companies have their own monitoring software, again, many of the companies that we've seen, multi-billion-dollar companies down to a couple of people companies, all of these companies that I've seen, they say, well, it's telling me when something goes down. Again, an MSP thinks about the warning signs that I just talked about, and they react to the warning signs and the events prior to them becoming critical outages. One of the things that a company should look for in a managed services provider is collaboration and teaching. When I first became a director of IT, I hired a company to come in and help me rebuild the network. But the company I hired, as I was doing my vetting process, I asked them outright. I said, as you're doing this, how am I going to know what you're doing? And several of the companies that I interviewed said, we'll put it in the scoping document, trust me, we'll work on it. We'll do exactly what we say we're going to do. As I'm responsible for it, I don't believe that I'm going to trust you. I'd rather see it. So in building managed services out and becoming a managed services provider, when I was on the flip side of that fence, and the company that I eventually hired to rebuild my network for me, but they came in and said, well, you'll stand side by side with us. You can help to make sure that we're doing what the business needs and doing what the business reactions should be. At the same time, we'll teach you how we're doing it and what we're doing with it. That real-time collaboration is invaluable. It's not just teaching your staff what we're doing and how we're doing it, but it's also getting that intelligence back, so as we're creating and implementing solutions, we are also doing it in consideration of all the gotchas. Often look at it like a forest for the trees. When you're an IT person inside the environment and you're working inside that forest, you have a point of view that shows you a bunch of tree trunks around you if you picture yourself standing inside a forest. You have some leaves on the ground, some pine needles, and around you you see a bunch of tree trunks, and above you you see a canopy of trees. Whereas an outside party sees the entire forest from a 10,000-foot view. Put those together and you have a holistic, three-dimensional view of your environment. So that collaboration is really, really important. I talked about this a little bit earlier, the access to the professional staff. Many MSPs, every MSP I've ever worked for, spend the money to have the specialized people on the staff. And anybody that's been in this profession for any length of time knows that staff is very expensive and gets more and more expensive every day, quite frankly, because the technology is becoming more and more complex. And as an MSP, I have the ability to spread that cost out amongst many, many clients, to have that become not only an operational cost for you, but ultimately an operational cost for me. And that win-win environment is something that you can tap into in any MSP. Despite who you choose or how you choose them, should be able to say, yes, you can talk to my Citrix expert. Yes, you can talk to my senior project manager. Yes, you can talk to my executive consulting arm. Any of those. Access, ultimately that professional staff gives you access to disciplines such as project management that may not be on your staff. Project management is an underappreciated, often underfunded function. I used to think when I was a director of IT, project management's easy, I can manage this whole thing on my own. Back then, when I was quite a bit younger, what I didn't take into account is what is my time cost versus what I'm spending on this project manager. And when you look at it in terms of real cost, as in my role, I was the director of IT for a worldwide organization at the time. I say, well, if I break down my cost, I'm going to cost $100 an hour, and to do this project, I'm going to have to spend 50 hours, so there's $5,000 out the door. Whereas the project manager they're offering me is only going to cost $2,500. If I had looked at that in real numbers like that, I would have said, yes, I want the project manager. But at the time, I was not thinking that way. I was reactionary, and I was saying I can save $2,500 if I do it myself. But in fact, you're not saving any money at all. The other things that managed services providers give you is access to a partner network. So nowadays, there is not one company does all. There's no unicorn out there. I recently had a client ask me to be that unicorn. I want you to be in charge of our application. I want you to help us tie our application API to another API, which is, by the way, a very custom application that we had written in 1998. And we've all kind of been there. And, do you do storage? Do you do this? Do you do that? Nobody does everything anymore. They just don't, because, quite frankly, every piece of it is a very, very expensive piece to get into. So they're selective. But the smartest MSPs out there, the ones that I've worked for, the ones that have worked for me, the ones that I've worked with and around as partners, they go out and they say, I'm going to be an expert in X, and whatever X is, I'm going to be an expert in network management, or I'm going to be an expert in healthcare management, or I'm going to be an expert in help desk, end-user help desk support. And they become so good at that that the MSPs that are out there say, it actually is better for my client, which is what we always have to keep in mind as managed services providers. It is better for my client if I bring in this expert to do that piece, and I'll do the piece that I'm an expert at. When I talk to companies who are afraid that they're going to have to trade off IT staff for my services, I tell them, don't do that, because I will never be an expert in your business. I'm an expert at delivering managed services in the disciplines that we operate in. I'm not an expert in healthcare, education, finance, manufacturing, whatever the vertical, right? I'm an expert at delivering a managed IT service. So that collaboration I talked about earlier really comes into play here. So moving along here, let's talk about that vendor management. Again, when you talk about the cloud, and you talk about the dispersed environments, and you talk about workplace of the future, every company that I've run across have multiple vendors to deal with, even if they don't realize it. Did managed services for a very small construction company out in California not too long ago, and they said, well, the only vendor we have is our ISP. I said, okay, who's installing your accounting software? Well, that's another vendor, but that's not really IT. Okay, who's taking care of the servers that's installed on? Well, that's somebody else, but that's just servers, it's not IT. The CFO that was running that small company didn't understand how the parts interoperated. So taking the time to explain to them, how these have to interact and have to talk to one another, and finding out that, in fact, the accounting software company had tried to load up a new version of the accounting software, and it crashed the servers because the servers were not capable of handling it. They didn't talk to the server vendor. They tried to put in a voice over IP phone system. Put it in, it failed miserably. They couldn't talk from one side to the other. Come to find out the voice over IP vendor didn't talk to the ISP, so they didn't have the appropriate bandwidth. These kinds of scenarios, although that was a small example, happen all the time, and the larger your company becomes, the larger your vendor management problem becomes. One of the things that an IT managed service provider should be able to do is to bring those vendors, at least a good portion of them, under an umbrella and manage them for you. So they should be able to say, okay, you have an application vendor here, a server vendor there, a hardware vendor there, an ISP, 5 ISPs for your different 5 continental locations. I will take the ticketing for everything and front in that for you and effectively become a vendor management portal for you. Through that and through the partnerships, MSPs can bring in time and cost savings. And again, time is money. When you think about, again, the time that you're spending to do it, lost productivity. I was on the phone last night at about 6 o'clock here in the Midwest, and one of our consultants who was on the phone, one of our high-price consultants, he said, this is the 6th straight hour that I've been in a meeting. And many IT staffs know that, being meetinged to death. Well, how much time is that taking? Because those meetings are with your vendors, they're with your staff, they're with your infrastructure providers, they're with your application providers, they're with the business itself. If you could have 4 hours back in your day, what would you do with it? You'd put it back into the business and you'd say, okay, now I can help drive that business. So the next thing, that Rachel has put up there is, how do you track the need for upgrades based on capacity, business initiatives, life cycles management? How do you predict the IT costs? Well, managed services providers bring predictability in there. By doing training data, by taking training over time, by saying, okay, I'm looking at, in this case it's a call manager, and I'm saying, how's that call manager performing? How's that server performing? And if you look at the screen in the nice free graph I put up there, that call manager is doing just fine. But you see the memory and the swap drives are up there at about 60% with a little bit of spike over time. Great. I can trim that out, and I can say, that call manager is reaching capacity, and so you're going to have to plan on adding another subscriber or adding another cluster, or whatever it is, maybe you grow your business. And by doing that, and by looking at that in a constant way and training that data over time, it really helps control those costs and help you plan for that next capacity. So when you go to the CFO for money, they'll say, here's all the data that proves I need that money. So you can plan for that based on known data as opposed to a guess. Many IT departments stand out there today and they say, I think that we need to do this. I need to add another 7 terabytes of SAN space to accommodate for the new Great Plains installation. Why? Why do you need that? What's wrong with ours? Well, ours is getting to capacity. So what's taking up the capacity? I don't know, but it's getting to capacity. Those kinds of business scenarios happen all the time. And you ask yourself, well, how do I really track that? Well, I can go to this program or that element management system or to this monitoring system, or you can go to 17 different systems. But these 17 systems are never a single pane of glass in an IT environment. So bringing that all into a single pane of glass is one of the things that a managed service provider really does for you and does well. And also, in terms of predictability, it helps you predict your costs. Quite frankly, a managed service provider worth their salt should say, this is all that my service entails and everything that I can give you, and this is what the cost is per month, and that the cost should be fixed throughout the life of the contract. It allows the budgeting to go through and say, okay, for this particular part of my infrastructure, for the planning part, for the capacity planning, for the break fix, for the monitoring management, it's going to cost me X amount of OPEX per month, which over time saves me X amount of dollars per year. and or allows me to grow the business by X percentage per year. When you talk about platform management and patch management, specifically, many companies struggle with this. What does that mean? What is patch management? What is change management? Many companies say, I have a server infrastructure, and my server infrastructure is 70% virtual and 30% physical, and I know that I always patch my AD servers. What about the other ones that are in your environment? Do you even know what servers are in your environment when you're talking about VMware? Oftentimes they don't. I have customers that literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of VMs. And I ask them point blank, what's in your environment? They say, I don't know. You'll have to go out and discover it. So when you talk about patch management, you talk about change and or change management. Does your company have a process? Is that process standards-based? How was it built? When was it reviewed? When was the last time it was updated? Often I hear companies say, yes, we put all this in place, but we never tested it. But we haven't updated it in the last 6 years. Great. You need to keep that kind of stuff up to date. Managed services providers, just by the fact of what they do, have to do that. I talked about the single pane of glass and the custom dashboards, so any managed service provider, again, should be able to bring your IT environment into a quote-unquote single pane of glass for you to see and for you to see the data. Ultimately, that gives you a better understanding of your infrastructure and how it works within your enterprise, and that's really what you're looking for. So, when you talk about managed IT services, what does it really encompass? Well, it encompasses what you see here on the screen, metrics, data, reporting. That's at the top of this circle quite on purpose. Everything has to run on that data and the reporting. Everything goes back to that. If I don't know what I have, I don't know what I need. If I don't know what I'm spending, I don't know what my budget should be. If I don't know what I'm spending, I don't know where I'm wasting money or where I'm saving money. Talk about the stranded servers in a cloud environment. It happens all the time. So by knowing that metrics, it allows you to do capacity and business planning, add business applications and services as they're needed, do event monitoring and resolution, and again, manage your software, your infrastructure, and your vendors. So managed IT services should really be an extension of your IT services team. It should supplement the missing skill sets that you have, that you might be missing in your environment, and or strengthens the ones that you already do have. So you might have a great network engineer on your staff. I learned very quickly coming in from a director of IT and being an old network engineer myself. I moved into the managed services arena, and I thought I knew everything about networking at the time, because it's a network. You get a packet from point A to point B, it should work, right? Boy, was I wrong. There are 1,000 different things that you can do on a network, and today there are 1,000 squared to 1,000 that you can do on a network today. There's just no way that one person can know everything. Getting, again, that outside the forward-looking in point of view is something that will do nothing but help your company. It adds a watchful eye to your infrastructure. Ultimately, having the staff 24/7, developing the software, keeping the software up to date, really building it correctly is something that not a lot of companies do. And again, I'll say it again, from mom and pop companies all the way up to multi-billion-dollar companies, I've seen this across the board. Many companies don't put these things in writing, and they ultimately become shelfware because they're tired of getting paged in the middle of the night for a virtual machine in the development environment that bounced, that they really just don't care about, or the work group switch that bounced when in the one-person office. Now, a managed services team works when your team can't or doesn't want to. I've delivered managed services in a 24/7 structure. I've delivered managed services on nights and weekends because the IT staff, oh my God, wanted to go to a barbecue or have the 4th of July off. So managed services does that for you. So a managed services team should be a trusted advisor. Every company like ourselves Every managed services company, every IT services company, every company out there that's trying to sell a product has salespeople. That's great. That's wonderful. But the managed IT services provider and the people that are interfacing with geek to geek, your geeks and our geeks, and your C level to our C level, and et cetera, what they should be really acting on is the best interest of your company and your business. Ultimately, my job is to enable your business to succeed. It's not to enable my business to grab the most profit and run, right? And any managed service provider that's in there to that kind of business shouldn't be in that business, in my opinion. What we should be doing is we should be coming into your company and saying, I am vendor neutral. I don't care if you have a Cisco environment, a Juniper environment, a Brocade environment, a white box environment. I don't care. What I care about is the environment that you have performing to the level that you need it to perform to? Is the environment that you have capable of supporting the business initiatives that you have 1 year, 2 years, 5 years out? That's really what managed services provider should provide to you, is this vendor neutral, trusted advisor type of role. Supplemental services that may or may not be in use by you, or you don't have the staff for, again, things like project management, executive consulting, things that managed services providers should be able to provide. Process building is also another one. That's a big one. Again, going back to one of the large companies that we have in our umbrella today, I asked them when I went in there, I said, how do you do change management today? And the response that I got back was, well, so-and-so wants to make a change, and he comes up to me and says, can I make the change? Now, mind you, this is a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing company. If Joe wants to make a change and Bob approves that change without knowing the nature of that change and or has the visibility into what's that going to affect, and all of a sudden, and this has happened multiple times in that environment, something goes down, breaks, crashes everything, the business starts losing money instead. A change process should be a very formalized process. It should follow things like ISO 20000 or the ITIL guidelines. So being able to come in there as that trusted advisor and as a neutral party, I should be able to help you build those processes out to standard and to best practice. IT services is a purpose-built organization. So again, if you think about what I said earlier, you are an expert at your business, I am an expert at my business. I do one job and one job only, and that is manage the day-to-day operation of your infrastructure. By doing that job, it enables many, many things within your business and within mine. But that's the job that I do, and I do well. That's the job that I'm an expert at. Once upon my past history, I was an instructor in the Navy, and what I taught, I was an expert at that subject. I would not, for instance, try to go out and teach medicine if I was an expert in satellite communication. It's just not the way it works. A managed services provider will never be an expert in your business. They may have expertise about your business, but they're never an expert in your business. And I'll talk about that expertise about your business in just a second. So, the managed services provider should have specific expertise in standards and best practices. Again, ITIL, ISO 20000, those are things that I should have expertise in. I should have a staff that is very well versed in general IT, specialized area, the ability to accentuate and hire and retain a specialized staff that, again, you may not necessarily have the capability of doing within your own environment. So, what business problems can the provider solve? Ultimately, it's about problem solving. Find it, find a way to solve the problem, try it out, test it, implement it. The testing it and implementing it are things that often don't happen in IT environments because IT staff is not afforded the luxury of either a development environment or the time to test it. Just get it working. I've heard that 1,000 times. So, when you're talking about the managed services provider, you think about how can this really help me? How can managed services really help me? how do I figure out if provider A is better than provider B? Well, you think about that and you say, okay, what's the cost? It always comes down to cost first. I understand that question happens. It happens to me every day. People ask me all day, can I operationalize this? Is there a capital cost to this? How do I budget for this? How do I plan for it? How do I justify it? What are the staff coverage times? Do I have the staff to cover 24/7? Do I not? Do I have the skill sets to cover 24/7? Do I not? Do I have the skill sets to run my environment properly? Do I not? Think about the SharePoint example. That person didn't really have the skill set to set up SharePoint. A lot of data, and therefore a lot of money was lost. Do I have the time to manage vendors? Does the managed service provider have experience and or expertise in your industry? So this goes to my point of may have expertise in your type of business. So does the managed service provider have on staff expertise in healthcare as a vertical, in education as a vertical? Do they have people that came from those environments and have experience? Do they have partners that have that kind of stuff? I mean, who here has contracted a provider for managed services and said, okay, the managed services comes in and says, I have all the bells and whistles and life is good, hire me, and you do, and you find out you have no idea how your company operates or how your industry operates. And ultimately what you've got is just a more expensive SolarWinds implementation. You have to think about that when you're talking to managed services provider and say, do you know anything about healthcare? Have you ever worked in that environment if you're in the healthcare industry? Do you know anything about manufacturing? Do you have clients within that industry that I can talk to? How do we operate with them? Right? Can the MSP integrate with your IT service management and communications tools, service desk software, IAM, et cetera? How do you talk to this managed services provider? Is it send me an email and I'll get on it? Or do you have a portal? Do you have direct IAM? Do you have federation between your company? Can your service desk software talk to one another? Can your installation of Remedy talk to my installation of ServiceNow? How am I interacting with that? How am I communicating that? How am I making sure that those knowledge bases that are created naturally from those communications never get lost? And we've all had the scenario where we had Joe Expert on our staff, and Joe Expert on our staff walked in one day and said, I'm leaving. I got a better offer from Bob down the street. Gone. All of that knowledge, all that expertise, typically passwords, typically environment setups, all left in the lurch. You stand there with your cup in your hand and you say, what do I do now? One of the beauties of having a managed service provider is all that knowledge gets built up and put in a database, and it's built out such that if you ever decide to move on for that service provider, it's all handed back to you here. I'm walking out the door, sure, but you have all of this information and all this historical data. It's all yours, belongs to you, you keep it. All of a sudden, you're not left with your cup in your hand. And again, what partnerships does an MSP have? That's a very, very important question. So what are the core offerings? Do they line up with your needs? You don't want to hire a managed service provider that specializes in help desk if your core need is a Citrix environment. I need to manage my Citrix environment. A help desk is typically for everything what I like to call in front of the wall jack. All the people that are sitting there using their computers, using their telephones every day. They don't care, nor do they want to be aware of the Citrix environment that's delivering that application or that desktop to them at any given point. The managed service provider, when he or she is coming in the door, are they experts on that end user or are they expert on the Citrix environment? Because while the end user is saying I can't print or I can't get this application to load is a symptom, the problem is really on that back-end infrastructure. So you want to say, I want to talk to an MSP that's an expert in Citrix and maybe has a partnership with the end user. What kind of supplemental or complementary services do they talk about? Again, you know, when I talk about professional services, project management, executive consulting, what's unique to each one of them? Do they offer you help with policy guidance? Can they help you build your policies or build your policy catalog? What's unique to each one? They might both offer router management, which is awesome, but one might say, I offer router management, but I also offer router management in the specific vertical of your industry. And therefore, I know that you have to have compliance reporting if you're in the healthcare industry or in the public sector. You have to have compliance reporting. Here's how I'm going to talk to you. Well, provider B is saying, I manage your routers, which means that I'll respond to an alert that happens on it, but I don't have any of that data for your public entity. You got to think about what your business is and then what are the offerings. Think about the unique offerings. It's, again, never an apples-to-apples comparison, never ever an apples-to-apples comparison with MSPs. What does their dashboard look like and what does it show you? What's the cost and what's the return on the investment? Everything comes down to the money makers. They're all, the CFO is always going to ask you, how are you costing? How are you paying for it? Because I have a budget to live with. I know about these budgets because I'm married to an accountant. She does that to me all the time. How are you going to pay for it? Well, you think about it and you say, okay, let me talk about my time. Let me talk about my effort. Let me talk about the business not being able to do what it was supposed to do last year because I was reacting to all this stuff. It really helps do that. And then finally, pretty quickly here, because I know we're running short on time, I'd like to go over a quick use case. We had a hospital system here in the greater Illinois area that came to us and they said, we really need a telepresence, a video installation to enable patient clinical administration, collaboration, and training. So they're using us everywhere from having their board meetings to literally remote doctor capabilities. So the doctor will see the patient over telepresence. Ultimately, they did not have the in-house technical expertise to do it. They had an MSP that was providing services for them, but they were, one, too costly, and two, not really providing full management. They were just doing break fix of the environment. So the MSP they had had no expertise in the healthcare industry. They were just a blanket MSP that says, yes, we can monitor it, and we can make sure that everything's working. But they didn't understand how the use cases actually applied to the environment. So the end users, because of that, were not using the system. The system was not reliable. It was not always up. They couldn't figure out how to get on. They didn't have any trending data put behind it. And so the hundreds of thousands of dollars they put into this installation were going to waste. No ROI because they weren't doing it. So when we came in and we said, look, we do have healthcare experts on our staff, and we are in this vertical, and we understand your use case, and we've done this, and so we come in and we say, we'll customize this to specifically what you're going to use this for. Built a best practice-based managed solution, including concierge service, and in fact, it came in at significantly less costly from the provider because instead of wasting the time and money of trying to get to a broad swath of managed services, we honed in on a very specific need so we could deliver the same level and actually a better level of service for much less cost because we weren't trying to do a broad swath management. The outcome of that, the end users are actually utilizing their system. They're getting ROI. The systems are being used at a significantly higher rate than they were. Patient revenue, patient satisfaction has gone up. The availability of the systems have gone up. And the system now is not only being used, but it's being tracked. Upgrades have been predictable. And they know we're putting upgrades for them and help them to grow this system more and more. So they're reinvesting in the system now, and they're getting out of it what they should.